Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Uninterrupted. I'm your host, Chris Hammonds, and with me today is our COO, John Faust. John, say hello.
Hey, everybody.
All right, guys. As always, we're diving right into it. So what I want to do today in this episode is really break down that false sense of security that way too many business leaders have when I talk to them on the phone.
Right.
And so what I want you to do differently today, John, is put yourself in the mind of a hacker.
Okay.
All right? And I'm going to see what you got and what we could do and what you would do to try to get through some of these businesses based off what they had.
All right.
So if you were targeting a 50-person company, where would you start?
So where everybody kind of starts right now is generally Office 365. So you have kind of three main methods that people are getting in. One, the biggest one is through their either Office 365 or Google Workspaces, and that's looking to get a business email compromise. Can I compromise somebody that you associate with and then get a compromise that then on your system that I could then use that to steal money or get access to an endpoint or do some lateral movement there? What you're wanting to do is we're wanting to build trust with the person that's receiving email to put their guard down. Where you'd be skeptical if you got some spam or maybe you've had good user training and you're looking out for doppelganger domains or any of those sorts of things. If a person that you're emailing directly with gets their email taken over and somebody replies back to an existing email chain, you're going to have a decent amount of confidence to think that's a legitimate transaction and click on something. So that's a lot of the places where we see things happen from, is that like getting that identity taken over from a Office 365 or Google Workspaces perspective to build the trust and then get your identity taken over. One of the other big ways is through stolen credentials. So they'll find a stolen credential, some kind of leaked credential from some website or something like that. People have password reuse. They'll use that in order to take over a VPN for somebody or say, hey, they don't have like multi-factor authentication on a thing or get access to the firewall to get through the firewall and get connection to the network that way. Or a lot of the times we'll see these firewall vulnerabilities, like there's a vulnerability with SSL VPN. Almost every single firewall vendor has had a vulnerability with the SSL VPN over the last couple of years. The FBI and Homeland Security says don't use it. Well, it's because the hackers are using it. They're using it to just, okay, well, I'm going to bypass that authentication pane. I'm going to use this vulnerabilities in order to get access directly through the network, through the firewall, through the SSL VPN, or to take over the firewall and open up my own ports so that then I have unfettered access into a system. So that's how initial access really happens. It's actually pretty easy. A lot of times they're not looking for targeted companies. When you're a 50-person kind of company, you're not being actively targeted normally, but your number comes up because somebody you interact with has gotten their email taken over and now they say, okay, well, I can look at getting you, or they have a database of all these firewalls that are on the internet, a new credential pops up, any of these sorts of things, and then you might get a spotlight put on you just from doing research and diligence, almost the way that a salesperson looks for companies to target, and now they just kind of come up through connections that they have maybe on LinkedIn or other things like that. It's really the similar situation just from a hacker perspective.
Gotcha. Okay. So if I have a firewall, I have an antivirus, a multi-factor, spam filter, you name it. What can you do with that? How can you get past that? Is that possible?
Well, so first of all, there only needs to be one misconfiguration to bypass any of those sorts of things. So like a spam filter, I can't block everything that's spam. Because if I blocked everything that looked like spam, I'd block a ton of legitimate emails. So we have to allow spam filters. Spam filters have to be looser than what would actually be fully effective from a cybersecurity perspective. So spam gets through all the time. Firewalls, they can't look at every single bit of traffic that comes in because things got encrypted, and we've talked about this in the past. Since that traffic's been encrypted, they can't look at the traffic coming in at all of it, so they can't block everything that's bad. It gets encrypted, put up, and locked up. And so if somebody goes and gets a spam email that has potentially a bad attachment in it or something like that, what could end up happening is, I get a user to click on that. The user then allows it through the firewall and it pulls it down, and because it's encrypted, the firewall's not going to be able to inspect it, and there's some trust that happens from like, I'm not pushing a file from the outside in, a user on the inside goes and grabs it and pulls it back in. That's what we're trying to do from that. Multi-factor authentication, the hackers didn't just throw up their hands and be like, well, people put on MFA, I guess our job's over. No, there's other ways to get around that. When you look at Office 365 MFA or Google Workspaces MFA, they're stealing something called session tokens. That's the little cookie that's on your computer that says, hey, my username, password, and MFA, it doesn't have that information, but it has, I authenticated with that before, and this little cookie says I am who I say I am. The hackers then steal that and put it in their own system, so now they don't need your username, password, or MFA. They have the little key card that says you're who you are, and they put it in their system, and they get access to who you are. MFA on the desktops, all those sorts of things. If I get access to a desktop computer or server, any of those sorts of things, I can run things script-based on that or run commands on that from some kind of remote access tool that do not allow, like I don't need to put in MFA to do that. Because I'm not running it as the user that's sitting at the computer, so it pops up there. I'm running scripts against that on the background, and I'm running tasks against that computer, not logged in through that method, because computers still need to function and do work without an authenticated user directly sitting in front of it. So it happens in another backend pane. Other thing that hackers are doing to get around EDR is they didn't raise up their hand and say, hey, this doesn't work anymore. What they did is they looked for alternative ways around. And so they're doing something that's called living off the land. So they're using legitimate pieces of software against you. The EDR doesn't have a way to know if TeamViewer, Screen Connect, or any of these remote access softwares are legitimate or not. They don't know that they're bad behavior. They just know that they're commercial software that allows tools for IT or for remote access or any of those sorts of things in order to happen. VNC Viewer, like you just name a whole bunch of them. They're all legitimate if they're approved and in the right hands. And the difference between a kitchen knife being a useful tool and a dangerous murder weapon is the intent of the person behind it.
Yep.
Well, these EDR antiviruses can't always look at the intent. And the hackers know that. So they get these softwares put on, and then they start running commands and things like that that are not going to instantly raise any alarm bells. And they just start pushing a little bit and seeing what they can get away with and what they can get away with, what they can get away with. Sometimes now, I'm not even looking to encrypt a system. What I would look for is if I got access to a PC and I was looking to do a lot of harm from that, what information do they have on this device that I can copy off first in order to like blackmail for, right? That's what the hackers are looking to do. So if I can get on a PC and I can open up a website to OneDrive, or I can open up a connection to OneDrive or Google Workspaces, where yet again, it's a legitimate tool that most EDR antiviruses, other things aren't going to flag. I'm using legitimate tools against it just for illegitimate purposes. And now I copy anything with a social security number or bank account number, anything like that, right. HR, payroll information, any sensitive PII data I can find or sensitive company data I can find over to this OneDrive that I control or this Google Workspace that I can control. Well, then I've exfiltrated data and I've done harm to the organization in a way that you're not going to be able to spot. So 4 good tools there, 4 tools that you really should absolutely have, but in isolation, without some kind of thing that's overall looking at it, that's looking at the intent, that's looking at behavior, that's looking at the logs, that's going through a security operations center, that's doing all the things that are a nested security approach, you're allowing a hacker to like skirt through the lanes of where somebody's like not watching.
Gotcha.
Right? If you have 2 security cameras that don't have a full overlapping field of vision, then a bad actor could go, if they knew what the view was of the security cameras, then they could constantly skirt in between that. It's kind of like how stealth bombers work, and they limit how the effective range of radar. They're not fully invisible to radar, but they limit the effective range, and then they fly a path that's in between those radar detectors.
Gotcha.
And that's kind of what the hackers do.
So when you talk about stealing the session token, that's basically another way of looking at that is, if I'm going to a concert, they give me a wristband. Once I get in with that wristband, they're not checking for entry after that, right? So
can you slip the wristband off and give it to your buddy, or sell it, like throw it over the wall? And that's a legitimate.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Now, one of the other things that I hear is, our employees know not to click suspicious emails. Mm-hmm. Now, if you were a hacker, and let's say you somehow knew that about a company, they're trying to avoid all this stuff, how would you still get around that?
Well, the easiest way to get around that is taking over somebody's account of somebody that they're interacting with. Because even if it's not suspicious emails, even if the company knows and not to click on suspicious emails, if I get access to somebody that you regularly have correspondence with, I can then craft an email, especially using AI and some of these things. I can craft an email that's very similar to what you'd be looking for, that's as a reply that maybe would cause your guard to be down enough to click.
Gotcha.
Right. So that's pretty easy there. It's harder from a spam perspective of just sending untargeted messages. Also, you can do things through LinkedIn, through connections, through fake profile, if it's really like a spear phishing type of campaign or a QR code phishing type of campaign where we're trying to really target the attack vector. But if you have enough leverage, you can get somebody to like kind of do bad things. On, like not even on purpose. You just have to have either the right leverage from a social engineering kind of standpoint, or you need to have some way that their guard's already down in a trust scenario, looking for something like that.
Yeah, I mean, if a hacker is kind of looking at your Facebook profile and it sees that you've gone to a concert recently, if I get an email that says, hey, this concert, we thank you for coming, here's 50% code to get 50% off, even though I'm skeptical on clicking on anything, that's something that speaks directly to me because I really want to go to that concert.
It's enticing. It makes you second guess it.
Absolutely.
If you're in a sales perspective, we deal with this all the time. If we get RFPs that come through pretty often, and we have to make some judgment calls about their legitimacy because that's a way to get into an organization. So your salespeople can be a way that your accounts can get taken over. Payment gateway requests or sometimes payments or discounts or things like that going to financial people, that's a way to get through. And so it's really, you're never going to be able to 100%, and this is the thing that I think people have a vast misunderstanding of. You're never going to be able to 100% verify the legitimacy of anybody you're interacting with that's not in a face-to-face scenario, right? You're not going to be able to 100% say, is that website safe? You're not going to be able to 100% say, is that email safe? So then what are the guardrails that you have around that so that if something bad happens, that it doesn't balloon into a catastrophic situation? How can you detect this nefarious behaviors happen and then lock it down to respond to that situation and then recover from anything potentially damaging that might have happened?
Gotcha. So let me ask you this. How often are hackers actually taking advantage of software vulnerabilities versus using or simply taking advantage of human behavior?
It depends. Like if it's internet facing, then it's one of the biggest threat vectors that they use, right? So a vulnerability comes up from a system, like we'll use a firewall. Say your firewall provider has an SSL VPN vulnerability, and I know I kind of keep kicking on this one. We'll kick a man while he's down because it's just the technology itself is bad and it needs to be it needs to be phased out with another solution, like SASE or something like that. They have a database of every single firewall that is online, right? So if your firewall is online and is able to be visible to the public, and you can go on public websites and find this data, like shodan.io. You can go out there and you can search up your public IP address, and if there's a device that's on the internet there that's visible, it'll show it. Well, they have a database of this. The hackers have their own databases they maintain. They know what's on there. As soon as one of these vulnerabilities come up, they're not manually going through one by one. No, they have their scripts and their AI bots and things like that just go and exploit these vulnerabilities as a new one comes online. They don't have to find out that you exist. They know you exist, and they're just waiting for the moment a vulnerability comes up so they can exploit it.
Gotcha. Okay. So if a company were to tell you, we don't have anything worth stealing at all, would that deter you as a hacker?
I mean, there's never been a company that doesn't have something worth stealing.
Bingo.
Like if you do any business at all, then you have something worth stealing, because this is about money. And so can they push one of those three pressures? Can they get access to the financials or get in the middle of a financial transaction? Do you have any sensitive data? And people tell me that they don't, but they do. They have employee records, they have social security numbers, they have stuff that they wouldn't want to be public.
Right.
Can we push that so that you have an issue with that? Or can we lock down your operations and you consider paying a ransom that way? The other thing, guys, that they do not care about is they're not going to find out whether you have anything that's worth stealing whenever they get access to you and they try to steal it from you. They're going to cause disruptions in the hopes that you pay anyways.
Right.
And so they're not going to get on and looking like, well, this isn't worth my time. They have low-level employees that are doing this hacking, and those people have quotas and they have all these sorts of things. They're going to, once they get access to a system, they're going to try to poke and see what they can find, because sometimes it's like, did you stop mining right before you got to a gym? Right? And so if they have access, they're going to mine until they either find that, hey, there's so many roadblocks in our way that it makes it unprofitable and they go someplace else. But if there's nothing standing in their way, then I've seen situations where people have put stuff on computers and just turned you into a crypto mine, right? So you don't have anything to steal, but they're going to sap every single bit of resource from that computer as possible to have it be a crypto mine for them, right? I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that it can materially hurt you or can be used against you, even if they think you don't have any money.
Gotcha. Okay. So let me ask you this: what type of public information would you kind of look at that would help you plan for an attack as a hacker?
Yeah. So a really big one is going on and looking at LinkedIn or some of these other things for employees either entering or leaving your organization. Yeah. That's a big one because that gives me, hey, there's going to be some change here where people's guards are down as they're dealing with some of these changes that happen. In order to do social engineering, which is actually physically talking to people or sending emails between people, going and finding out org charts or org structures, recreating those things from LinkedIn, all that kind of stuff. Really, from a sales perspective, it's the exact same thing that you look for when you're marketing to talk to a potential new customer. It's the same thing, right? And that's what makes it so dangerous is they're using normal business practices against you. It's just the intent behind it. One is like, we're looking to help people, and yes, we want to get more clients and stuff like that, but we really fully believe we're helping them, so we want to help more people. They want to hurt people. It's the same way, though. Like the way that happens is very similar.
Gotcha. So if you were able to get into a business successfully today, what would be the first thing you would do?
I would first look to see what data I could steal on the device I was on and exfiltrate that in a way that nobody would notice or raise any red flags first.
Okay.
I would then look to move laterally to see, like, hey, if there's nothing on this system, I would look around and move laterally and see, like, hey, what, without trying to really raise any alarm bells, what can I touch and see what starts to alert to my presence? And the more and more that I can touch and the less that alerts to my presence, then the more that I can do to try to cause something bad to happen for that organization, whether that's monetary gain or things like that. Whenever I audit a place and do that, I will look for things in that manner of like, hey, where does this system just tell me no? A lot of this is like, where does this system start to tell you no, right? And I've gone into places who have the four things that you mentioned, EDR, all those sorts of things, and I've sat down at an endpoint and was able to very quickly find the domain admin password. I've done an audit at a place where walking around and they didn't give me the domain admin password for like a test or whatever, and I was able to get it within 15 minutes of being there. Sometimes it's not that hard if you know what to look for and they're not protecting things adequately. I've gone into places where they told me that their cloud infrastructure is sacred and anything in there is super sensitive. Well, they didn't have MFA on it. I was able to get one of the admin users' passwords to that within a few minutes, and then I could have done whatever I wanted in that cloud infrastructure, including stealing data from them, deleting data. I've been into cloud infrastructures. I've gained access to cloud infrastructures where I would have been able to change people's payrolls. I would have been able to change the direct deposits. I would have been able to do all kinds of damage to the company, so potentially change where everybody's direct deposit goes to, like by getting into their direct deposit information into their payroll system on the cloud. I could have changed who their direct deposit went to, could have given everybody a raise and just had it white money out of that, and I would have been able to steal it before maybe the red flags would have gone off that something nefarious had happened, especially on the people that are on salary, because that doesn't get changed a lot by the organizations, right? And so it's, once you get access to a system, there's a lot of damage that the end users can just do with what they already have permissions to that, what do you do to actually be looking out for, hey, this is unusual for that user. This is unusual behavior for that user. And then what are you doing to have pulling these disparate systems together and saying, okay, I'm not exactly that worried that TeamViewer was used here, although that's not an application that they normally use. So I'm going to have like a little question on that. And then, TeamViewer got installed, and it came in through this weird method that's not normally the way a user behavior would install TeamViewer. So that adds a little bit more to it. Gotcha. And then these other like little flags happen that are all these what we call indicators of compromise. They all stack up and they get sent to the Security Operations Center. Then they look at that and say, hey, this looks to be questionable enough that we're going to lock that endpoint down, and we are going to say, let's stop it communicating for the rest of the world and the rest of the devices around it, and let's start asking questions. Gotcha. Right? Let's go and start asking the end user questions about what happened, just to make sure that it was actually them. If it was actually them, then we would look at, say, why are you doing things that are outside of the normal operations for this organization? So we could talk to them from a cybersecurity perspective, but also be like, from an IT perspective, is there work that you're trying to do that you can't get done because certain things are running in your way? So it's not just security. These things work together in tandem to kind of say, how do I make the organization function better?
So how long realistically could you hang out on a network before you were ever detected?
So dwell times had been steadily increasing. A lot of them were, so it's called the dwell time, how long a hacker's like sitting on a network before something happens. They were creeping up to plus a month, like pretty regularly, things like that.
Okay.
What we're seeing now is this whole process is becoming faster due to some AI tools and some things that are doing that. So AI is helping these companies do this type of thing faster. And so when they get on a device, they can do some of these innocuous things very, very quickly and start getting certain things that can start damaging you fast, so that if they know, like, or they have an idea that they're going to get blocked out before the encryption happens, or sometimes they don't want to encrypt it. If they get on a device that has a bunch of data, they're going to start doing things relatively quickly before you potentially even see it. And I've seen situations where we have a whole nested cybersecurity that happens here. There's been plenty of times where the EDR antivirus got no credit for detecting nefarious behavior that happened because it wasn't something that was in its purview.
Gotcha, okay. So I'm gonna stump you with this one. So if I have a password, it's got 27 words, a special character, some numbers, a blue unicorn, all of this great stuff. If I make that password as hard as possible, but you can seal this session token, is that password strength kind of irrelevant at that point?
Yeah, that's correct, because they have the basically key that what that password unlocks, right? So that password is like a series of keys put together, and then they've gotten that key. So they don't have the actual information from it, but they have the thing that it obtains, which is the access through to a thing. The same thing happens on a computer. Like if you have a really complicated password, and you're doing sorts of behaviors that aren't like correct, like say you have the same local admin account across every single computer, right? There's a hacking method that we call pass the hash, to where what happens is it uses that encrypted key that gets generated from that really long password and goes to another computer that has the same username and password and said, yeah, I'm this guy. I don't need to do any extra authentication because I have the basically session token. It's a different word for the PC-based thing, but I have basically the token that says I'm who I say I am, even though if I don't know the password. The other thing is if you do have a 27-character password with all the blah, blah, blah that you're mentioning there, or whatever those sorts of things were, and you're just reusing that password everywhere, and that gets hid in some password database, well, they can take the encrypted version of that and compare it to other different encrypted versions and potentially break what that password is.
Gotcha.
In like clear text hacks that have happened. So that's why password reuse is a problem as well.
Okay. All right, so just to wrap this episode up here, John, so any advice that you would give to a CEO who thinks that they are not vulnerable in any way, and from a hacker standpoint, what advice would you give them?
I would look back from them, what are the outcomes that you're looking to achieve there, and then work backwards from the potential entry into the network all the way through how they can exploit those outcomes, right?
Gotcha.
Because what the whole mentality of cybersecurity has shifted over the past few years from we're going to protect everything in this castle and we're going to wrap it in bubble wrap and we're going to make sure that nobody gets in. Right. And that's just not the case anymore. You have to assume now that somebody is going to get access to an endpoint. From there, what can happen? And I'm not saying you give up on the firewalls and the spam filters and all those sorts of things. You still have to have that for the low-hanging fruit.
Right.
Like you still have to block those things. You still need to block the like junk that's out there and the crap, the low level hacks, because it doesn't cost the hackers anything to try those. They just have systems that run them, right? So if somebody isn't being protected from those, they still work for the people who aren't doing anything to protect themselves. But then past that, your next sophisticated attack where it's, hey, I've got an email account taken over, or I've gotten a computer account taken over, or I've taken over an email account and that gives me access to the entirety of the OneDrive information or the Office 365 infrastructure. We've been seeing more and more people with more data being put in the cloud. That authentication pane is moved, and once they get access to that authentication pane, they don't even work to hack the internal computers. They just steal all the data out of the cloud and then hold people for ransom that way. And so if somebody gains access to an identity, if somebody gains access to a computer, if somebody gains access to one of these things, what damage they could they do? And then you build your cybersecurity program from that. If your people are not having conversations with you like that, if they're just saying, oh yeah, you got a spam filter, firewall, and MFA, you're good. If you're just checking off boxes, then you should really get a second opinion and say, hey, what are we actually doing? And we can help walk people through that.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Yes, if you're looking for an unbiased second opinion to make sure that you're doing enough for 2026, reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to help where we can.
And we've told people before, like, they're doing a good job. Right?
Yeah.
It's not a lot.
But it does happen.
Right? It does happen where it's like, hey, man, like, they're doing a good job. Kudos to them. We'll give them claps and go from there.
Absolutely. Well, guys, make sure you like and follow, and stay tuned for our next episode. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Uninterrupted, a podcast from Forbes Cybersecurity. We hope you walked away with practical insights to protect your business and stay ahead of the latest cyber threats. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share with your colleagues. For more tips, resources, and cybersecurity updates, visit Forbes.com, that's 4bis.com, and follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook. We'll be back soon with another episode, so stay vigilant and stay uninterrupted.